The balance of power in the Senate flips to the Democrats. NBC News projects both Democratic Senate candidates, Jon Ossoff and Reverend Raphael Warnock, have won their respective Georgia Senate runoffs. Both men making history. Warnock is the first elected black senator in Georgia's history, and Ossoff will be the youngest member of Senate.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us back here at the Moose Club. So a couple days later than what we were kind of hoping to do, but the Georgia Senate runoff elections were decided with both Democratic candidates, Warnock and Ossoff, winning their races, which effectively gives the Democrats control of the Senate. It's a 50-50 split, but with the tie break. They'll have control of the Senate chamber. So obviously the implications for the Biden administration are pretty significant. This, let's just kind of just talk about that. Like what, Bork, what do you think with Democrats having the 50 with the deciding tiebreak vote with Kamala? What, there's already been some reports about this changing, potentially some of the Biden's cabinet picks. But what do you think this means for Biden and kind of what his approach is going to be in his agenda? In his first term.
I think he'll get most of whoever he wants through, as long as they survive their committee confirmations and whatnot. I think he'll be able to get mostly everybody he wants into his cabinet. The issue, the only issue that I potentially see with how the Senate's oriented now for getting legislation done would be Joe Manchin, who has already been, at least kind of showing that he is going to be the person of fiscal responsibility in the Democratic Party, making sure they don't go too far, which, depending on how serious he is about that, could potentially pose a huge problem for any sort of major legislation that needs to go through, which I think everybody here would agree needs to be done, not just for COVID, but addressing some of the major issues that are looming, climate change and things of that nature. Just more or less how healthcare is going to be addressed in the near future. There are some major goals that need to be accomplished, and having someone that's kind of tamping down the dollar amounts that those things could be gotten through the Senate could potentially be a problem. But the Democrats, they are in the driver's seat now, so they are able to pass a lot of different policy goals if they are pursued in their fullest. So I remain cautiously optimistic.
So Joe, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think with this, with the way the Senate map shapes up for the midterms, I think this likely means that Democrats, there's a good chance they're going to be able to have control of both chambers and the White House for Biden's first term, the entire 4 years. It's a pretty tough map, isn't it, for Republicans in the Senate in 2022?
Yeah, there's 34 seats that are going to be.
Granted, with that said,
Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Florida.
Granted, the House elections, and the general election this year didn't go as expected, so there's that aspect. But cautiously optimistic that they could have a full 4 years to kind of enact their agenda. Bork, you mentioned that probably going to be able to kind of get the his first picks, his first options of who he wants into those cabinet positions. I think the only one that comes to mind that might still be an issue is the SecDef, the Secretary of Defense. I know he wants Lloyd Austin, who was in charge of like CENTCOM for quite a while. But there's that whole period of you have to be out of the military for a certain amount of time. I think 5 years maybe, or 7 years or something like that, before you can enter government.
Yeah,
like
I
Mattis
think-
got a waiver.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of Democrats that are kind of iffy about like that whole rule is in place for a reason. And so there's people that are iffy about, granting that waiver again. But I mean, if not, there's plenty of other qualified people that can fill that role. But I think the big one, I think we were all kind of thinking that it was going to be Doug Jones for Attorney General until kind of the results came in, or were kind of coming in, and kind of the reading the tea leaves of what was going to happen. And then, there was stuff on Twitter about, well, Biden now is thinking he wants to tab Sally Yates, who was the acting attorney general when Trump came in and he, fired her. Then, like, not long after that, it was Merrick Garland, who, of course, was Obama's Supreme Court nominee, who never was even given a hearing or much less a vote when he was up for the nomination. So it's interesting. I think, I mean, overall, he's going to be able to – he's not going to have the battle that he was going to have on certain nominees, and it's just going to – it's going to be a non-issue now, which is good. But Joe, what do you think? Like, just the significance of winning both those Georgia seats to, essentially take control of the Senate?
I mean, it opens up a lot. I'm assuming you were talking. I must have missed the name, Bork. I'm assuming you were talking about Joe Manchin.
Yeah. Yep.
I agree that Joe Manchin could pose a threat for something that was like, I guess, would be deemed really progressive. Probably not progressive in your eyes, but like something that's above like normal progressive takes might be a problem. But I think Democrats will also have a pretty strong power grip on him, saying like, hey, your seat's probably not very safe anyways. We're going to take these 2 or 3 seats in 2022, most likely. So we really don't need you. So, hey, if you want any chance of us funding you strongly, like, you better play ball. Like, and you can use your political capital that way. You can't really take him too far off because you do want him to have a chance to keep that seat. But I don't even think he's up in 2022. I think it might be 2024.
Right.
So, I mean, him being on the ballot during an election year is even a bigger problem for him. So, I think that they have a pretty strong hand against him. As far as like nominations, I don't think they're going to have any problem nominating anybody. I know the only person before the Senate runoffs in Georgia was that they were talking about having a problem with was the person nominated for the budget. I can't remember her name, but they were scared Republicans were not going to vote for her because she said some mean tweets about President Trump, which
And Nira Tandon.
That has plenty of irony, stripe with it. Usually history doesn't lay on irony that thick. But the fact that they were mad that she sent mean tweets about President Trump is beyond even funny.
I mean, look what Lindsey Graham said about Trump back when Trump was, nominee Trump. I
mean, it's beyond imagination that Republicans could sit and with good faith, which obviously they don't, but with appearance of good faith, like admonish somebody for sending mean tweets. Like it's incredible. Imagine that they finally saw a tweet, because the standard reply was, "Hey, I didn't see his tweet today." So, it opens up a lot. Like one thing last night, I bought a lot of cannabis stock. I think the passing of federalized decriminalization of marijuana it's on the tab. It's going to happen.
I disagree, but I think there's now a better chance than at any other point, but I still don't think it'll happen. But that's just my
Why do
opinion.
you think it's going to happen?
I just think that there's enough people still, even within the Democratic Party, that think it just should be left up to the states to decide how.
I don't think that you'll be a straight party vote on that.
That's true. That's fair. Yeah, that's a good point. I
Plenty of
think, yeah.
Republicans that have been pretty lenient on their theories about it.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that's going to happen. But infrastructure will get done. Once again, talking about like how big the check's going to be. We need an infrastructure bill. It creates jobs. In the long run, these infrastructure bills always pay for themselves with new revenue streams and new taxes on that revenue. So the fact that that hasn't been done.
Wait, you mean we never got the infrastructure bill from Trump?
No. And then talking about another bill that Trump always had like right on tap that we were going to get, I can see maybe not some like extremely structural changes to the healthcare system, but I'm assuming that we'll see some new bills, whether it's Medicare being able to negotiate with drug and big pharma. I know Klobuchar and Sanders were both on that bill, so I mean those two are pretty polar opposites in the Democratic Party. So I'm pretty sure they'll be able to find enough support. Probably forgetting some things, but I don't think they'll be too progressive because I don't think Biden can allow that with his message. But I do think they will get plenty of work done. Like it's no longer going to be the discussion of, hey, what can they get done? It's what do they want to do and how they're going to set themselves up for 2022 and 2024.
Yeah, like I think Bork, you mentioned like a climate bill. Like they're not going to be able to get the Green New Deal through, but they're going to be able to get some form of something passed addressing the climate issue, like which is good. Like it might not be exactly what we want, but what's that, Joe?
I don't think they will.
I don't think
that, because I mean climate and West Virginia was one of the most dependable blue states in the nation before 2000, and in the 2000 election made like a 60-point swing inside of 4 years, and it has everything to do with coal.
Yeah, but
so you will not have Manchin on that. Then if you want a really progressive bill or somewhat progressive bill, you're going to have parts of it that are going to be about fracking, parts of it that are going to be, taking away subsidies to oil, oil and natural gas. Like it could get done, but I wouldn't hold my breath for anything, anything that we, even as Democrats, view as acceptable.
Sure. No, you might be right. What I'll say to the West Virginia part, and I'm trying to remember where I've read this, or I'll try and find the sourcing for this, but the whole West Virginia coal, like that's just more of a messaging issue. Like there are not a lot of jobs in West Virginia in coal. Like there just aren't. Like there's this perception that like coal like props up the West Virginia economy, and it's just not true. Like there's not a lot of jobs in coal in West Virginia. So like maybe, I don't know, hopefully they can kind of navigate all that, but kind of backtracking here a little bit to some of the other implications of Democrats controlling the Senate. We were kind of talking offline before this about, like it's things that Republicans are super effective with for these last 4 years, controlling more than 4 years, but judicial nominees, like Democrats are going to be able to hopefully, as best they can, kind of try and balance the scales in terms of, kind of counteracting all the judicial appointments that Trump was able to get through. The census, and the redistricting coming up in 2022, Democrats are hopefully going to be able to, push for fair redistricting. Not like Joe kind of mentioned previously, they don't need a gerrymander. They just if you do it in a fair way, it already benefits Democrats. So you don't have to go above and beyond and kind of play all these games. But yeah, I just think just the fact that McConnell's not going to be able to jam up anything that he wants at any given time is just in itself just a win. They're going to be able to S.E. Cupp was on CNN last night, and she's a Republican. I mean, prior to Trump, she was a pretty staunch Republican, and she looks less so now because of the way the party's evolved. But she was saying it's going to be good just to be able to have debates on the Senate floor about issues again. They're going to be able to just debate these issues about from the conservative point of view. We're going to be able to debate about taxes and about limited government and stuff like this. And Democrats are finally going to be able to make their case on the floor of why some of these things are beneficial to the American people. So I mean, I think it definitely gives Biden kind of a wider path of what he can kind of, whereas before, if the Republicans controlled the Senate, his options were probably limited on what he was going to be able to, spend his political capital on and try and get through. But now, I mean, he's got a little wiggle room to work with. So hopefully, we'll see. We'll see
Okay.
how it plays out. What,
Talking about the court, I think one thing we haven't seen in a while. Usually it's, people that want to retire or, deaf. But I think there's going to be an extreme push on Democrats to try to convince Breyer to retire.
get somebody young?
Yeah, because Kagan and Sotomayor are both relatively young.
No, I mean,
they can't risk having what happened to them.
No, exactly. And, it's definitely playing politics, but I mean, if Republicans are going to handle this the way they've handled it, then okay, then you have to be smart about how, I mean,
talk him off the bench.
Yeah.
Right. And, not that, and that's not saying he's not capable of doing the job anymore. He totally is, but
he's 82.
He's 82 years old.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if
can't get burned
yeah, and you have to think somebody like him, a smart person like him who cares about the rule of law and sees how this has been politicized, the last, few years. You have to think that he recognizes that and wants to, hopefully at least, not.
Well, you would have hoped the last justice would have thought that too, when Obama.
Yeah,
we were well on this path when Ruth Bader Ginsburg had the opportunity to retire, and she didn't, and got absolutely burned by it.
It's
hopefully he does the right thing and steps aside.
How I know this is we're conflating reality with one of our favorite shows, but it's not unlike the West Wing episode with Matthew Perry when he's in it as the Republican counsel at the White House, and they convince him to go see the justice that he clerked for about that was kind of going a little crazy and stuff. It's not that situation, but there's parallels to the if you're gonna leave, do it while we have control of deciding who's gonna take your spot, type of thing.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, all the Republican justices do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It's not.
Yeah.
So so with all that, so the implications for Biden, we kind of talked about that and what that means for him. Obviously good news for Biden, clearly, but what do you guys make of just in general with Georgia going completely blue during this election? I mean, Georgia hadn't elected a Democrat to the Senate in 20 years. And not only did they they went blue for the president and both Senate seats. Like 4 years ago, I don't think anybody would have expected that to be the case at all. Like, do you guys think this is a symptom of Trump specifically, or do you think this is kind of like part of a bigger trend of, things moving more liberal in some of these traditionally red states? What do you think, Bork?
I mean, I think the Georgia case is just, I mean, you got to give a big shout out to everybody there doing ground game stuff. So, I mean, I think that is a big tell that if you're going to be flipping some of these states, having people on the ground there working not just election year, but prior to election years, and maybe not that election year, but in the future, those do eventually reap rewards if you're willing to be patient with them. So I think, just all of that deserves a big shout out. I think it is a continuing trend that places that have a generally traditional, a good minority base, and then suburbs that would generally kind of switch back and forth between Democrats and Republicans. I think those states, I think North Carolina will be the next area that'll start becoming a generally Democratic state. I think those areas, like I think Colorado won't be, I don't know how much longer you can consider it purple, but I don't think Colorado will be a purple state much longer.
Cory Gardner lost. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wouldn't view Colorado as a purple state anymore.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's kind of the trend you'll continue to see, that if there are some generally well-populated areas there, they'll be able to carry the states Democratic enough, just given how the Democratic Party is constituted and what I think we would all agree what direction the Republican Party is going in just is no longer tenable for some of these people. But there are segments of the Democratic Party that still appeal to a lot of these people, specifically on the anti-progressive wing of the Democratic Party. It appeals a lot to these people. So I think that's a very winnable coalition for the Democratic Party moving forward. So that's
Real quick, Joe. So I think real quick, well, first to you, Bork, the kind of what you mentioned about the ground game in Georgia and how they've kind of been building that up with, obviously with Stacey Abrams. I think we talked about this, maybe the preview to this election. The Stacey Abrams, had that impressive run in Georgia, and it's. I mean, I'm sure you could probably poke holes in this, but there seems to be some parallels kind of to 2016 with what the Republicans did with Wisconsin, how they kind of built that ground game in Wisconsin over a period of years, and then the Democrats just kind of took Wisconsin for granted. Hillary didn't really campaign there, and then boom, Trump wins Wisconsin. I'm not sure it's an exact,
Yeah, well, I mean, given how the problem is that Georgia's in the South, so
right.
that is instantly going to be against Democrats in general. Wisconsin's slightly different in that it was kind of, more or less a progressive state, but due to, Koch money essentially and Scott Walker's governorship, that state was able to be carved up in such a way that the GOP just had a stranglehold on it, and that was the only message that could get out for such a strong amount of time. But we've obviously seen how many Republican governorships have actually followed through on GOP policy, ruin their states, get voted out, and people got to try and pick up the pieces where they're what was it? It was either Wisconsin or North Carolina. I can't remember. Either outright withheld governorship powers or just didn't allow them to.
Well, didn't they have a recall vote in Wisconsin?
I can't remember exactly.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
what it
Wisconsin had a
was.
recall.
Yeah.
North
So
Carolina governor before Roy Cooper didn't leave.
yeah. So that's the kind of forces you're fighting with in some of these states, and I can only imagine how much of a nightmare Georgia was. But it seems like from what I've read that it even started before Stacey Abrams ran for governor, that she was building this kind of like there were forces on the ground in Georgia trying to get the state to start turning blue, and she didn't obviously bear the fruits of her labor, but obviously this time around we're able to. So
I think ultimately,
I think that's a good roadmap for other states that Georgia is definitely not a lone example among other states that are in the South, nonetheless, to be flipped blue. So
yeah, in you mentioned Stacey Abrams didn't benefit from essentially what I think she's credited with what she started. But I think in the long term she's going to be. I think it's going to benefit her greatly. I think she's.
I just meant as
right.
Right,
yeah, it didn't in terms of running for governor. It didn't work out, but in the
yeah.
long term, she's going to be a serious player in the Democratic Party.
Right.
Joe Bork also mentioned with like how he thinks. Correct me if I'm misrepresenting you, but North Carolina is probably going to pretty quickly turn. You would guess.
I would think so.
And I think Joe. Correct me if I'm wrong about this, Joe, but I think you've mentioned in the past, like, that's kind of what happened with Virginia. Like Virginia, like went blue in a hurry. Like it wasn't like a slow build from red to purple to blue. It was like red to blue in just a few short elections. So I'm curious to see if that's what happened. If that's just moving, down. If that's if it's moving to North Carolina. And then South Carolina, it was more competitive. South Carolina, like Jamie Harrison, there was a lot of money put into that, Senate campaign. And then Georgia, obviously, we see what happened with Georgia, and then we'll see what happens with Texas over the next few years
Arizona.
Like there's just in general.
Not impossible. It's
not
impossible.
And just in like it's gonna happen. It's a matter of how quickly these things happen. But like society is, I think, just naturally becoming at least socially on social issues more and more liberal on a lot of these things. Like,
well, see, that's kind of what I was saying in the previous episode, that there's always the possibility of some political realignment that we're just we just can't see at this point.
Yeah.
So at least based on what demographics is destiny hypothesis, that there are a lot of states that could potentially, if they're not red right now or purple, they're going to be solidly blue based on voting tendencies right now. But there's always the possibility of some realignment, and maybe we're in the middle of it right now, and what that shakes out to be, tough to imagine. But
Joe, what sorry, we've kind of kept you out of the conversation. What do you think
Joe, what do you think's going to happen? Well, no.
What do you think this means for just the tendency or the trends of some of these traditionally red states just potentially shifting blue or just becoming reliably blue states?
Well, first I do want to give a shout out, a little less known name, but just as much to do with what happened in Georgia. Black Votes Matter, Latasha Brown.
Mm-hmm.
That driving a bus around the country to register voters is pretty admirable. But I agree with Bork. I think both sides are going to try to argue. We saw this with the phone calls that came out from the DCCC, but everybody's going to try to claim credit, but it was a mixture of things. Like, I mean, you could have gotten all the minority vote in the state, but if you don't get, you know, Cobb County and, you know, the more suburban, this doesn't happen. But also on the exact opposite, like you could get all these suburban votes, and if you didn't get the black vote out, you know, it would have been the same story. I think one thing that we haven't talked about, and it's been talked about, you know, it's wearing thin, but Democrats better come home and freaking take care of minority voters, because Trump made a pretty good inroad with them in this last election, and Georgia probably outpaced the rest of the country with black vote for Democrats. But Democrats are really doing well in states that are purple because of minority voters. The same thing happens in North Carolina. You go down to North Carolina, and I mean, you go outside of Raleigh, Durham, like in Charlotte, there's probably a ton of Republican voters, but Durham, Raleigh, you know, that keeps it close. I think North Carolina will be next. I think the the failings of Cal Cunningham probably, you know, worked up and down ballot. Other than that, Sun Belt, a lot of it has to do with education. You know, one of the strongest ways to predict what party you're voting for right now is education, and these Sun Belt states are where people are moving to. College graduates, young business, like you said, Austin, Texas, and Charleston, South Carolina. Like, South Carolina's economy is booming. These are going to be the next battlegrounds, and we've been talking about it for years, but if Democrats can get these and hold whatever else they do, like, they're going to have a pretty strong, not only just House and Senate map, but a pretty strong electoral map to fight with. So
yeah, it's
hopefully they keep it under control.
Yeah, right. That's the issue, is like, don't screw it up. You know, and you mentioned it, like, we're heading to a point where at least it looks like, where the Electoral College isn't going to be a threat to Democrats anymore, which is great. I mean, obviously, if we had it our way, we would just get rid of the Electoral College altogether to begin with. But, like, I mean, especially if we get to the point in the next 15, 20 years where Texas is blue, like, the Electoral College is irrelevant. I mean, because I don't see, you know, like California's not going to go red. Like that's not, I mean, maybe. I mean, I don't know. People probably were saying that 10 years ago about Texas. It's not going to go blue. Like, I mean, I don't see that happening. So yeah, I mean, we're probably, if, you know, things keep on the same trend, moving towards a place where the Electoral College is not going to be a threat anymore. I'm trying to think of who it was I was listening to last night. I've been watching a lot of news the last few days. I can't remember who is saying what, but they were basically like, it was a Republican. I just don't remember who. It might have been S.E. Cupp again. I'm not sure. But they essentially said, you know, in the last 20 years, like, a Republican hasn't won the presidency, and also won, you know, 20, 25, 30 years, and won the popular vote, you know, very many times, you know, unless your name is Bush. Like, outside of, I mean, Bush is the only one. Like, Trump obviously didn't do it. But no, it's interesting. I think there's reason to be optimistic after seeing what happened. Hopefully it's part of just a larger trend and not just a response to Trump. Like, hopefully it's not, you know, somebody halfway respectable, you know, comes along as a Republican, and all of a sudden it's back to Georgia as this, you know, staunchly red state. I don't think that's going to happen. But we won't know until, you know, that plays out.
I mean, going too big has a good result. I'll say that.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, for right now, what's in front of us is Democrats win Georgia. It's completely blue, president, both Senate seats, which means Biden has it's big news for the Biden administration, huge. So yeah, I mean, ultimately, Joe was here and for the midterms in 2018, and that was exciting. Like, that was awesome. Like, that was like, we were all, that's a repudiation of Trump, and blah, 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 blah. I wish, had COVID not been a thing, that we could have been, here for, well, the runoff probably wouldn't have happened anyway, but just the fact that there's been such a change from 2016 till now, I think is pretty remarkable. It's pretty impressive. And hopefully, I mean, the Democrats, they're in a position now where they can actually do some real good. Like, they've been, for a long time, they've been kind of shut down by McConnell being in charge of the Senate, and they haven't been able to, get a lot of stuff done. But I mean, there's no excuse now. Like, if they can't enact their policies, and they're not going to be able to do everything they want to do, but what you guys kind of alluded to that. But
I mean, how many times? A, not very many, just one-term presidents.
yeah,
But B, how many times have one-term presidents just launched off their first term with control of the House, control of the Senate, and a fairly friendly judiciary, and then proceed to lose everything but the judiciary by the end of the first term?
yeah, I think
That's pretty remarkable.
right. We looked at it. Joe and I were talking about it last night. I think this is the sixth time in, at least not in, since the two-party system was enacted. This is the sixth time that it's gone from one party in control of the whole thing to the other. But I mean, yeah, I mean, Trump accomplished a lot of things for Republicans, and especially with the judicial aspect of things. But I don't know how you can look at the Trump 4 years and come away with any other conclusion besides, like, this was a net loss. Like, we would have been better off having Ted Cruz as our president. Like, we'd be in a much better position today than if Trump was. Not we, the Republican Party. Yeah.
The greatest quote I've ever heard about, well, the two greatest quotes I've ever heard about Ted Cruz is, one is Ted Cruz is soft as baby shit. And then the second one was yesterday. I heard it on the radio. I don't remember who said it, and they said, I like Ted Cruz a lot more than most people, and I think he's a piece of shit.
Yeah, I had a good Cruz quote today, but we'll probably not repeat that on it was pretty funny. But yeah. Georgia blue, Democrats, White House, Senate.
Get to work.
Yeah, quite
Next.
Yeah, right. So everybody make sure that you like, follow, subscribe, share Moose Club Pod. Look for us on Spotify. You can find us there by searching the Moose Club. And then, just be on the lookout for future episodes. We'll probably I think we'll probably do something this weekend, with the protests and stuff, and maybe a kind of a follow-up, wrap that whole issue up. But just be on the lookout, and appreciate it. Thanks for watching.